Is Every Man an Enemy? Chapter 2. Lose a bib or a baby elephant, and there's always somebody ready, willing, and able to help you find it. In our civilization, such things are planned for. But lose an author, particularly one you have never seen or even uttered a word to, an author, moreover, who was never really your property in the first place, and what can you do? Beyond advertising in the personal columns of the Times, Telegraph, and Scotsman, Harvey Innes couldn't think of a thing. Now, sitting alone at a table in the saloon bar of the Codgers off Fleet Street, Harvey's anxiety showed in the deep circles underlining his worried blue eyes. Doubt gnawed at the corners of his thin-lipped mouth. What on earth was he to do? What could he do? Alternately, gulping at his half-pint tankard of mild and gnawing his nails, Harvey Innes sought for a solution to his problem. Where was MacDonald Hall? How could he find him? And if he didn't find him, what then? Harvey Innes knew very well what then. He knew what he would have to do, and he inwardly cringed at the prospect. Without MacDonald Hall's signature on the final contracts, Six Pillows to Midnight could neither be published in book form nor serialized. He, Harvey Innes, would have to switch off the light on all his fine financial expectations and tell John Bovis so. And Bovis would not be pleased. Harvey knew that. All along he'd led the publisher to believe that there was no impediment to immediate publication. And Bovis had made his plans and written his print orders accordingly. For him, the final contracts, which currently lay as heavy as lead in Harvey's inner pocket, were nothing more than the merest formalities. He talked over everything with Harvey, hadn't he? And Harvey, as MacDonald Hall's agent, had approved everything, hadn't he? Wouldn't any publisher in the circumstances, wishing to get the book into the shops as quickly as possible, have given his printers instructions to go ahead? Harvey shivered. He felt physically ill. By not telling Bovis the truth, by hoping against hope that MacDonald Hall could breezily walk into his office as he'd promised to do, he had involved the publisher in considerable expense. He had encouraged him to order 50,000 copies of a book he might never be able to issue, never would be able to issue, without MacDonald Hall's approval. Oh, where was he? Where was MacDonald Hall? If he didn't turn up, if Bovis had to be told, Harvey could see a fat writ with his name on it in the offing. He had dreamed his dreams of making thousands. Now came the cruel awakening. Bovis could sue him for everything he possessed. He could take everything from him, his business, his surefire school, his money, his trunks packed with customer shirts which had been lost in the wash at his Chinese laundry. Everything. From a tall bar stool placed at the very end of the counter, Arthur Kirby, Splash to his friends, star columnist of the Daily Post, regarded Harvey Innes speculatively and wondered what he was looking so very worried about. Presently, unable to contain his curiosity any longer, he ordered 2 large whiskies from the green-eyed blonde behind the bar, got down off his stool, and crossed the floor. "You mean to sit there and tell me," Splash Kirby said, "that you not only haven't the faintest, foggiest idea of where MacDonald Hall is, but you don't know who he is either?" Harvey Innes nodded miserably. A few moments before, Kirby had arrived at his table. The big, beefy journalist had stood above him, looking down. "Is this a private wake, or can anyone join in?" Harvey hadn't answered. He'd felt too sad and sorrowful to answer. But Kirby, with the easy familiarity born of long years in the business of garnering confidences, had not been rebuffed. "Here," he said, "have a nibble at this." And he'd slid one of the double whiskies beneath Harvey's disconsolate nose. "You look as though you could do with it. Now, in what other way can I help? What's the trouble?" And Harvey, feeling at the end of his tether, realizing that he must unload his sad, mad story on someone before he went crazy with worry, had told him. After all, he thought, Kirby is on the Post, and the Post is involved. He works hand in glove with Brer Fox, the features editor, and Fox has got to know sometime. But this was merely a mental excuse to cover his great need to talk. He needed to empty his pitcher of woe, and he would have emptied it over almost anyone. As it was, Kirby got the lot. And the journalist listened in silence, incredulity chasing frank disbelief across his battered features. Then he got a firm grip on his glass, took a great gulp of whiskey, and bared his teeth in a ferocious grimace. Now let's get this straight. Let's go right back to the beginning again. Harvey Innes looked very unhappy. The manuscript of 6 Pillows to Midnight reached you when? It came through the post about 8 weeks ago, with no address for its return. I told you, Harvey Innes began. Yes, you told me, Splash Kirby agreed, but I'm just making absolutely certain that I understood. Now, with the manuscript, there was a letter. That right? Yes. And the letter made it quite plain that the writer, this MacDonald Hall, only wanted criticism of his work at that stage. You advertise a criticism and advice service for aspiring authors at so much 1,000 words, at so much 1,000 words, and MacDonald Hall was simply taking advantage of it. Yes, Harvey agreed miserably. In the same letter, Splash Kirby went on, this fella, MacDonald Hall, told you that he couldn't then give you his address because he hadn't got a permanent one. He said he was moving around a lot, but that he'd personally contact you within the next week or so, presumably to hear what you had to say about his manuscript, collect it and pay your fee. Is that right? Harvey nodded numbly. But in fact, you didn't wait to hear from him again, but sent off his manuscript to a publisher right away. I read it and liked it, and you sent it off to John Bovis. It was his kind of book. I thought everything would be all right. I only wanted to help MacDonald Hall as much as I could. You know how I like to help a beginner. Kirby, who had known Harvey Innes for some considerable time, elevated an ironic eyebrow. You hoped it would be all right, you mean? You hoped that when MacDonald Hall toddled into your office, you'd be able to knock him sideways with the news that someone was already eager to publish his masterpiece. And you hoped that consequently he'd think that, as an agent, you were the cat's shorty pyjamas and that he'd agree to you taking a whacking cut at the proceeds. Harvey Innes swallowed dismally. In a small voice he said, well, wouldn't you? In view of the fact that MacDonald Hall had particularly told you all he wanted was criticism and advice, Kirby said shortly, my opinion is that you stuck your neck out. Anyway, he went on, the real damage wasn't done then. When Bovis had read the book and gone overboard about that, you could still have held things up with MacDonald Hall, got in touch with you once again, until he got in touch. But you didn't, did you? That's when the real damage was done. Harvey Innes said falteringly, I was expecting Hall to contact me at any moment. Bovis wanted an answer to his offer one way or the other. There wasn't a lot of time. Bovis said he wanted to publish as soon as possible. Go ahead, Kirby said. Blame it all onto Bovis, but I know what he'll say. So did Harvey Innes. And so, Kirby said, without consulting the author of the book in question, you agreed to Bovis's terms. You let him think that you had the authority to negotiate rights, and on that assumption he took the book for publication. In fact, you had no such authority, and for all that you knew, MacDonald Hall might well kick the arrangement clean overboard as soon as you'd told him what you'd done. I didn't think that was very likely. As I said at the outset, Kirby remarked, you hoped that he'd turn out to be someone you could take advantage of. You hoped he'd be pleased and reward you handsomely. Harvey sat back, not saying anything, just staring moodily. Kirby went on. And then, as if you hadn't done enough without the author's approval, you went ahead and okayed the sale of the serial rights to the Daily Post. I thought it would be all right, I tell you. You hoped it would be all right, Kirby corrected again. And it might even have turned out that way if MacDonald Hall had contacted you, as he said he would. But he hasn't, has he? He hasn't contacted you at all, and now you're wondering why, and what can have happened to him, and you're worried sick about what's going to happen to you when Bovis and Fox find out what you've been up to. It isn't only that, Harvey Innes muttered. What? More bad news? What else could you have done? Nothing else. It's just, well, I could do with some money, that's all. Your agent's commission, you mean? Your 10 or 20% or whatever it was you're hoping to squeeze out of this Hall character. Suddenly, Kirby's rumpled, crumpled face split. He began to laugh. He stopped for a moment with his broad hand over his mouth. Sorry, Harvey. I'll laugh away, Harvey Innes said bitterly. You haven't a care in the world. It's all right for you. I'm sorry, Kirby said, grinning. I shouldn't have laughed, but it does strike me as funny that you should get yourself into this mess in the hope of making yourself a nice little pile, and then after you've made it, be unable to touch it. If only I could find MacDonald Hall, I've advertised in the Times. Maybe he doesn't read the Times. We can't all be top people, you know. I've run the same ad in the Telegraph and in the Scotsman. Much the same argument applies. Kirby had spoken the words almost offhandedly. He was thinking. Suddenly he said, seriously, look, this is a pretty desperate situation. You don't know how desperate, Harvey Innes said, feelingly. If I tell Bovis what I've told you, the chances are that he'll sue me. The same goes for your paper. And I told you that I needed some of the money. I do, and surefire schools in the doldrums, that kind of thing is seasonal. I'm behind with my rent and, well... His voice tailed off miserably. Yet all this can be turned to your advantage, Kirby said slowly. Both yours and MacDonald Hall's. Handled right, the situation could develop very nicely. Bovis could do quite well out of it too, yes. And the Post, Kirby was thinking hard. This situation, if it were properly exploited, could sell a lot of copies of 6 Pillows to Midnight and a lot of newspapers as well. How? Tell me. You're going to have to come clean with John Bovis, Kirby said. You're going to have to do that as soon as possible. You can't do it tonight, but you can do it first thing in the morning. And after that, you've got to go along and see Fox, the features editor of the Post, and confess to him. He'll probably blast your ears off and Bovis will be sorely tempted to kick your teeth in. Oh, fine, Harvey said bitterly. But suppose I come with you, said Kirby. Both to see Bovis and to see Fox. And suppose I suggest that the Post runs a campaign. Who is MacDonald Hall? Where is MacDonald Hall? That kind of thing. It'd drum up interest in the book and the serial. Couldn't do any harm. It should find your missing author for you. He warmed to his theme. Massive publicity. That's what you want. And that's what you'll get too. As soon as the Post runs this story, if every other paper in the street will want to be in on it, you can bet your bottom dollar on that. And the television boys are bound to play it up into the bargain. Yes, you should find your missing author all right. And furthermore, it may even turn out that he's one of the Post's regular readers. It could be, who knows? And if that happens, my boy, so far as Brer Fox and my Baron are concerned, I can assure you your sins will be forgiven. Already, Harvey Innes was beginning to look a little more hopeful. Do you think you could put over an idea like that? Would you? Just leave it to me, Kirby said expansively. If he handled this thing the right way, it should sell a lot of papers and do him nothing but good with the Baron, the Post's belligerent proprietor. Just leave it to me. See you in chapter 3.